Shalom, shalom, Mishpah. This is Jared Yao checking in. I really didn't mean to go live just now. I meant to take the picture for the live, and I just went live, so we might as well go ahead and get get started. How's everybody doing? I hope the day has been blessed. I hope everybody's doing good today. I hope everybody is protected out there. We got a lot going on, you guys, and I suppose there's a lot that I could talk about. But I did want to talk about a particular thing. But before I get to that particular thing, I did want to discuss these wildfires that are going on. And, there are popular topics that people will follow the news cycle and talk about. One of those things being the Shalom, Shalom, Aki. Good to see you on here. One of the things being the wildfires and stuff that's going on, and then kind of trying to see what is going on with these wildfires. There's a multitude of things that could be going on, but what we know for a fact is that this is a terrorist attack that that is being waged on America, and it's by the government of America. This is the people that are the really the inventors of even the term terrorist. So do you see what I'm saying? So they are particularly adept at doing terrorist attacks against people that that they don't know are terrorist attacks. You see what I'm saying? Even Hurricane Katrina, right? We always like to say that, okay, well, you know, mankind doesn't have control over nature. And I would say, nature as in Elohim's, the Elohim sky, the nature that Elohim put in place. They don't have those type of powers. Um, but I do think that they do have the ability to manipulate those powers that already exist. Do you see what I'm saying? So we know that America is known for terrorist attack. They're the king of terror attacks, and all these different concepts going forward. Everything that happens in the media that is you know in the media and reported on, um, uh, in the mainstream media, in the CNN level media. We know that those are going to be their events, and the largest events are always theirs. So we don't have any, you know, doubt in our mind that this is a terrorist attack and that there is some goal. I've heard, that is for the smart city that's coming. I've heard many different theories on what this is. But what we can be sure of is that it's a terrorist attack, right? And there have been several, you know, here leading up to the Trump presidency. We had the attack in New Orleans, and then there was the bank, the insurance guy that was killed. Several things that have just been going on that have, you know, all had narratives and stories around them. So, um, yeah, you guys, there's two people on here. Shalom, shalom, everybody. But what I really wanted to come on here and talk about, just, fires aside, we recognize that this is a terror event. But that aside, what I really wanted to talk about was the concept of deep cover. Someone told me that I should watch Deep Cover the other day, and I did. And it brings up, a couple different concepts that we want to kind of think about in the community, right? Now, I'll tell you, and I guess this is what I want to talk about more than anything right now because it's just on my mind. In the Hebrew community, I know for a fact that there are cops built in to the Hebrew community. Do you see what I'm saying? That some of the people that you're dealing with are cops. And let me just explain the scenario. And this is really an extension off of our conversation about Chicago gang and, drill culture, because it's really there too, and is really being driven in that culture by the police. Do you see what I'm saying? The divisions that the people have in Chicago are invisible divisions that are that are being, you know, I guess the word would be just inflamed, or the tensions inflamed artificially. Do you see what I'm saying? The boundaries that are between the two communities that are battling, with O Block and FBG Duck, uh, with that war, they're like a block apart. So these two communities are neighbors, and otherwise they'd be one community. But the artificial boundaries that were placed there allow for destabilization to occur. And this is, of course, another way that terrorists behave, in communities. They will reorganize the community. And this is why you have in South in South Side Chicago, Barack Obama as a community organizer, because he's a terrorist and he's looking for ways to inflict, their terror operations on the public. This is, what is so important about being able to interpret what's going on around you, because they'll give you the terms to describe themselves, right? We all know of the concept of terrorism, being, a major factor in world, in the mind, in the mentality of the world after 9/11, right? And we know that 9/11 was an Ashkenazi dash American operation, right? And the terms that came from this operation, or that were more solidified, because of course the term terrorist was around before then, but definitely more solidified after, that term, that quote unquote magic word, that instills fear in Americans' hearts now. Shalom, shalom, my brother. That instills fear in Americans' hearts right now is, a term that best describes themselves, right? And this is the American government basically telling on itself, because, the excuse that they've given for the operation, you know, um, as a terror act from the Middle East, is actually the best way to describe them as the American government, that is, as a terrorist organization that operates on fear and manipulation, behind the scenes. And so one of the ways that they manipulate people is by infiltration. And this is not, as far as, okay, we're going to kick the door down, SWAT team style. They'll do that too. We know from Fred Hampton that they'll do that too. But what I mean is that they'll send undercovers in to kind of not just spy out, but to also direct the thinking of the people that, the organization, the leadership that are being spied on. Do you see what I'm saying? So the concept is that that the Black Americans, being the Hebrews of the Bible, are the most dangerous people in the world. Do you understand what I mean? Not dangerous as far as, okay, well, these are the most violent, the most treacherous, or, as if they're a terrorist group unto themselves. No, because we have the ability to join up and be obedient to the commandments of Yah. And when we do that as a people, we would be unstoppable in battle. That means that we are the most dangerous people on the planet to an organization, to a country that would not want that. Do you see what I'm saying? That would not want, the kingdom of Israel, the ancient, the future kingdom of Israel. Do you see what I'm saying? The power of Elohim, the calling of Elohim, exist in us, right? As a people, and not to say, okay, that that we're better or stronger or anything like that. It's just we have direct access to the creator of the universe, or what we call the universe, right? We have direct access to him because not because we called on him, because he called on us. Do you see what I'm saying? So that makes us dangerous. Do you see what I mean? That makes us dangerous to the adversary. That makes us the most dangerous people in the world. So we have to be contained and maintained and surveilled and supervised to make sure that we don't develop into a righteous nation, and then prophecy fulfills and we take our role as leadership over the world. Do you see what I'm saying? Excuse me. So because they don't want that to happen, they have developed a style of infiltration that involves people that are actually involved with whatever movement that they're trying to spy on. I'm watching Malcolm X here. We're actually watching it now. And Malcolm X says that he had brothers that were in his movement with him and Nation of Islam or Muslims that would come up to him and say, okay, well, I'm a cop. Just to let you know, I'm a cop. You see what I'm saying? And they would be there to spy. They would be there to do all the things that cops do. But these particular brothers would introduce themselves as cops. Do you see what I mean? And the fact that that needs to happen for people to be surveilled proves the power associated with the people. Do you see what I'm saying? And again, not to toot any horns or, pat on the back or anything like that. It's just biblical facts, going all the way back to Balaam, biblical facts. So it behooves them actually to do this. If they don't have any idea on how long that they will maintain power, right? As long as they got their foot on our throat, we can't do our job, which is to teach the ways of Elohim and to really enforce the ways of Elohim, and not in an unrighteous way, in a righteous way. Do you see what I'm saying? Judgment, mercy, and faith. These things you ought to do and not leave the others undone. He said this is the way that you apply the law, with judgment, mercy, and faith, right? And these are things that we know. This is what Messiah taught. That's why it's important for you to understand love and Messiah and all of these New Testament quote unquote concepts, because you don't want to overplay your hand when it comes time to. And I mean, that's a side issue. What we're talking about is that even in the Hebraic community, they've sent in plants, right? And I will tell you guys what's crazy. What is crazy about that is that what's crazy about that is I've run into some of them. Do you see what I'm saying? And they don't necessarily appear like cops, but they'll give themselves away in some sort of way. Like, for instance, one of my teachers, one of my best teachers I know, had to have been a cop. Do you see what I'm saying? Because he came out and said that he was employed with the Justice Department, right? And I'm not going to name any names or do anything like that. But when I say that this was one of my best teachers, this is one of the guys that was foundational in my walk, that showed me the ropes, that taught me a lot. Do you understand what I mean? So, so how then? So this is the question. This is the quandary. What do you have there? Do you understand what I mean? What do you have if you have, does it lessen the movement? Does it, take the fire out of the truth? Do we have to question it as being true? If cops are in it and they're playing the role and they're doing a good job at the role, do we then question the movement? Do you see what I'm saying? We don't. That's of course we don't do that, but we then think to ourselves, where and why does this lie this way? What is the angle? Do you see what I mean? What is the angle there? And so that's what I had to ask myself. Even being out here in West Africa, there are agents out here. it's it's crazy, y'all. And they give themselves away sometimes. But again, not in so much to say that it's a definite, right? But the space exists for it to be that way because of their connections, because of their ties, because they don't have any, showable source of income. Do you see what I'm saying? It's a strange thing, y'all, that this operation that they've got going on, deep cover, undercover operation that they've got going on in the community that's been active since the 60s. Do you see what I'm saying? Is still just as active and is still influencing the culture in certain ways. Influencing the culture in certain ways. And so we talked about, police agents dressed up like members and going into, Chicago and posting up and surveilling as gang members, right? you know, we talked about that last time. What's the next step if you are able to, to have a clandestine operation where now you're undercover? You got to recognize that this is a satanic society, and the goal of a satanic society is to undermine, destroy, demotivate any black organization at all. Do you see what I'm saying? Even ones that they control. Because the name of the game, if you're the adversary, is to kill the chosen. I mean, that's literally the name of the game. Even, as people groups in Galatians chapter 4, it's natural for the bondwoman to be jealous of the free woman. Do you see what I mean? So this is just really par for the course that we're dealing with, but um, but we are dealing with it. Do you see what I'm saying? You've got these cops that are dressed up like gang members. The next step is to keep the war going yourself. Do you see what I'm saying? So you're motivated to do these things. You're motivated on a fundamental level to keep the violence active. And that's what you see. But if you see that in Chicago gangs, right? And then you also see the people that are all over TV that are just like open snitches, right? That are getting paid from the government. One of the bloggers, just a couple of the bloggers, in fact, all of the bloggers. There are some of them that have come out publicly and said, "Yeah, I work for the government. I'll take a check." One of them in particular made 25 grand in 1 year just being a snitch. Do you see what I'm saying? He had his paperwork come out, and that's what his occupation was snitch. This is one of those deep cover guys where they are actually giving them the ability to poison the community and then allowing them to do it and then just come plucking them up whenever they want. Do you see what I'm saying? And so his job at one point is to be a snitch. But now that he's a blogger, what's the difference? If as a blogger, who you say and who you associate with and the people you promote versus the people you don't, if that's what drives the internet, if that's what drives the content creators, if that's what, drives the conversation, then the community will respond. You see what I'm saying? The community will respond. So you got people that are out there now as bloggers who are saying, oh, well, if I interview this guy and he says how he wants to do this and this to this other guy, and then he goes out and does it, it's not my fault because I'm just a journalist, I'm just a reporter. No, you're literally instigating the war and you're acting as what's called an agent provocateur. That's what that's called. You're an agent provocateur. And if that's what you're doing, then then you're working for the government. You're doing the government job. It's just the next step to be able to say, oh, okay, well, I'm actually working for this guy who's this agent. If you don't say that, or if it's under the table, or if it's deep cover, then it appears organic. Do you understand what I'm saying? And then if that begins to drive the culture, then you literally have the government driving the black culture. And where are they driving it to? See what I'm saying? That's why when you see these provocateurs in the Hebrew community, you have to imagine, what are they doing there? Why, they're not there because they don't need to be there. What are they doing there? Do you see what I'm saying? And so to get into that a little bit, I've been doing this research for a very long time. And, you know, I come across a lot of different things and a lot of different, pieces to this grand puzzle that start to make a lot of sense if you put them all together, right? And so before there was such thing as an ISIS, I just want to tell you guys this. Before there was such thing as an ISIS, right? The terrorist group ISIS, right? And we all know that's a pagan deity. So we get where the origin of this concept comes from, right? So before there was such thing as that terrorist organization named after this pagan Egyptian deity, um, there was a group of special forces officers called ISIS. Not only were they officers, but they were ex-officers. They were like Delta guys. If you guys know anything about Delta in the Army, Delta Force, they're this off the books um, uh, special forces group that operate completely black ops, and mostly, and we know what black ops are now. They're the black operations that have fed crack into the city. That's really what black ops is. But that's what these Delta Force guys do, and they go completely deep cover, right? So where was I going with this? Oh, yeah. So on this particular website, it was a group of these guys who were like that, but they were professionals of that thing. Do you see what I'm saying? And they offered their services to different agents within the government or within other governments. And they listed themselves online literally as government contractors. You actually had to pass a gated website to get in. That means that your IP is taken down just because you enter into that website. It was like a gated entry. If you know anything about DoD websites or anything like that, you know that they'll have a gated entry that you have to have a code to get into. The only reason I know about it is because of my job. I'm in transportation, so we deal with military bases when we transport things, and in order to access those transportation opportunities, you have to have a code and you have to have a security clearance and all of these different things, right? Not a security clearance as like a member of the structure, but like a security code verifying that you are who you say you are. You have to have that to access some of these sites. And this was a low level version of that, but that just tracked your IP, but you still had to have it to get into that site. And so I was told about this site, go check this out. And I knew about it after they start calling these terrorist guys ISIS. And this ISIS, this was not a Middle Eastern group. It was an American group, and they were ex-military Delta Force guys, but they were government contractors, right? And so I start going on the page and looking at the page, like the capabilities, the locations of operation, the concepts behind them, the capabilities. I looked at capabilities and I clicked it, right? And I saw all of these things that they could do. And in the list, it literally said, this is what blew my mind. In the list, it said doctrine writers. Doctrine writers. So they have people who write doctrines that come up with doctrines that you can literally hire on the internet, that governments have hired to do these things. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see where I'm going with this? And so if you have an organization, and then the doggone thing was called ISIS, and then next thing, I looked at, you go to another section, you look at field of operation for this particular group, the Middle East. So you've got an undercover group called ISIS who operates in the Middle East and who writes doctrines. And then you have an actual terrorist organization called by the same name, who is a slanted doctrine of Islam. That's a violent one. It's almost story-like. It's almost movie material. You see what I'm saying? And so if you go on that website today, I believe it still exists. I hadn't been there in a long time, right? But if you go on that website today, they've changed it. I noticed because you visit something, you're like, dang, I gotta know about this. So I'm just gonna put it in my mental catalog so I can come back and check on it later and see, if I'm trying to prove a point in a video or anything, just put it in my mental catalog that this exists. And so you go, and check up on it, every so often. And so I go and check up on it, right, to see if it still exists. And of course, it's changed. So instead of ISIS.gov or whatever it was, .org, it had changed to SIS. No. The website itself was changed to SIS, but the handle was still IS. That's what it was. The URL was still ISIS.org, but the actual screen page, they had changed everything up to SIS. That was the name of their their group, SIS, instead of now ISIS. Do you see what I'm saying? And people would say, oh, well, that group came out and then they changed their name. No. Because they didn't want to be associated with that. No, too many people were coming on after they were exposed, and then they had to change their name so it wouldn't be so obvious, right? And so if they get away with it, doing all that in, the Middle East, in that particular area, right? What are they doing to us? Why would they need people implanted in the community? What concepts in the community do we know to be false, right? What concepts in the community do we know to be sins? Do you see what I'm saying? People are following these different styles of doctrines, these Edomite doctrines, and Jerusalem is in South Africa doctrines, and all of these different things where it seems to have like a play associated with it. Because literally the Edomite doctrine is an ancient Talmudic doctrine, y'all. I was shocked to see, because doing the research on this Edomite concept, you come across these little things that look like, oh, okay, well, this maybe what they're saying is true. But no, it turns out that what the Talmudists did, and these are our ancestors, but what they liked to do was to place ancient enemy names onto new enemies in order to make the new enemies look bad, right? And so what they used to do was call, since in the first century they were oppressed by Rome, they used to call Rome Edom. They said that they're like Edom, or they're the daughter of Edom, or this is the way Edom treated us. Do you see what I'm saying? And so these Talmudists literally, or these people that were doctrine writers, were literally able to pull from the Talmud a concept and then apply it to the new enemy today in the same style that they did in ancient times. Do you see what I mean? Because check this out, you guys. The Romans are not white. The Romans are not Gog and Magog. They are Hittim. They weren't the ones trapped up in the Caucasus Mountains. They weren't the ones that spent 1,000 years in the mountains and in the wilderness. That's not them. They're from a whole different group. So you can't say that Rome is Edom and therefore the white man is Edom because it don't even fit, right? And not only that, there is a sin associated with it. Do you see what I'm saying? And we know the sin is in Deuteronomy 23. Do not hate an Edomite. He's your brother, right? Don't hate an Egyptian because you sojourned in his land. And this is just, the icing on the cake for a doctrine writer. Oh, they've come up with a doctrine that they can hoist on to the people, and that doctrine is a literal sin. And not only is it a literal sin, it's wrong because it's the complete wrong people. And not only that, you can figure out who they are and where they come from. If you guys have been in the military, you know that's a cadence. But you can figure them out just because of where they got the style from. If they got it from the Talmud, then they must be people who are modern day Talmudists. It must be the Ashkenazi in them that put this play together. Do you see what I'm saying? In a similar fashion. Doctrine writing, coming straight out of Jerusalem from the Ashkenazim people. They have spy agencies too. They don't have to even use their own. They can use some of ours because they clearly have access to everything that we have. Do you see what I'm saying? We know right now that they are in a war to take over the entire Middle East. You're getting ready to see the nation of Israel grow right in front of your face. They're going to conquer Syria. They're going to conquer Lebanon. They're going to conquer Yemen. They're going to conquer all the places around them. They're going to conquer Egypt. All of these different places are up for grabs. And and that is happening alongside a warlike president. That's openly warlike coming in. And so the other thing that's happening, real Israel is waking up. All these things are occurring all at once. And we see that there has to be an operation to handle us active now. Do you understand? They're not going to wait around for people to just wake up on their own. It would behoove them to start the process themselves and then control where it goes. You've got the Edomite doctrine in the community. That's the most popular doctrine in the community, and it keeps the community in disobedience, you guys. It keeps the community in disobedience. So that is a deep cover operation. It can't be anything but. And so I watched this movie, Deep Cover, the other day, and it just basically outlines the entire structure of what they're doing. Do you see what I mean? And it's not really anything new, but but I watched this movie as a kid, and when you see things that are sentimental to you, that are really a part of your upbringing, it kind of hits harder, and it brings you to a starker realization that, geez, while these things were happening, they were actually mocking us about the things happening. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like an extra punch in the gut, and it kind of wakes you up, even further to the things that they are willing to do, even. Do you see what I mean? And so the craziest part about that whole concept, even, is that Deep Cover, the soundtrack to Deep Cover, was from who? It was from, Death Row, right? It was Death Row, Snoop and Dre and all them. They did the soundtrack to Deep Cover. And check this out, you guys. They are cops. They had cops in their squad. They were reporting to the government in the same way. Do you see what I'm saying? That the actual rappers on the soundtrack to Deep Cover were actually in Deep Cover themselves. You see what I mean? And not like literal, badge wearing cops, but as informants, as infiltrators. Do you see what I mean? Infiltrators, um, designing the culture as they go and pushing it towards destruction. You see what I mean? Designing the culture into the worst that it could possibly be, right? And people idolize Tupac, but he was instrumental. He was an actor. Tupac was an actor, y'all. Tupac wasn't a gangster. He was an actor. He was playing a role. Do you see what I'm saying? This is where we don't consider that this is, even people who know that he's an actor and know that he was playing a role, still respect the role. But you can't do that because the way he's acting is poisoning the community. So that means he's not an actor, he's an agent. He's an agent provocateur. Tupac was an agent provocateur. And the style of provocateur that he was one who had to die. Do you understand what I'm saying? For his message to take hold. We talked about this in the last video, that they just go off the Messiah's, you know, theme, and anything that they say and they want to stick, they have to kill the person that said it in a fashion to where that he then becomes a legend. Do you see what I'm saying? In order for those words to ripen into fruit, in order for them to grow, like Messiah says, you have to kill the seed. And that's what they've done. They've made these mini messiahs, these anti-messiahs, to come from our community and actually provoke the community into wrongdoing. And you don't have to provoke our community into wrongdoing because we are, apt to do it ourselves. But when you have this unnatural push towards wrongdoing, towards evil, towards false doctrine, then you've got to recognize it for what it is. And it is on top of what we would do to ourselves. Do you see what I'm saying? You have to recognize it for what it is. But that's really most of what I got, you guys, to talk about this concept. But it's just an interesting concept to me. If anybody has any questions or any discussion, it's just an interesting concept to know that in the Hebraic community, there are just cops sprinkled in, and they're sprinkled in with doctrines attached to themselves that somebody somewhere has written in order to steer the community in a negative way. Do you understand what I'm saying? That sucks. That really is terrible because it means you just have to be extra careful. You have to be able to navigate and maneuver, in the spirit. You have to be able to recognize where the enemy is and what, flavors the enemy might come in so that you can guard your understanding. Because you can't be out here and pick up the wrong doctrine. And then next thing you know, you're worse off than where you started. And then you turn around and look, and the person that you picked up the doctrine from is a cop. You see what I'm saying? Is literally a cop or an informant. And in most of these cases out here, y'all, is that they're literally cops. And that's a scary thought. But, like I said, and this, before I get off here, I have another quick question. I hope I ain't got nothing in my beard here. And when I say I learned a lot from this guy, you see what I'm saying? When I say I learned a lot from this guy, I learned a lot from this guy. A lot. And so, what does that mean? And the thing is, I know he's some sort of investigator. I know that. It has to be the case because he's told us that he worked for the Justice Department. And so what part of his doctrine is fabricated? Do you see what I mean? Do I hold on to some fabricated doctrine? Now I know this guy, right? I know him, and I know, basically how he is now and how he believes now. And now you can see, that there are some holes in his doctrine, and you can see where he's kind of led people in a specific direction, almost, pacifying people instead of, teaching and preaching and going out and doing things. He kind of held services, and people do that. People tend to fall back into a church mentality, a church state of mind, when they form congregations. But it could have been intentional so that people don't necessarily go out. I was not encouraged to, and when I was under this particular teacher, I was not encouraged to go out and do any street preaching or any evangelism of any kind whatsoever. It was actually frowned upon. And when I when I actually tried to go out and do some of these things, it was a bad look as far as everybody was looking on me like, oh, okay, well, who you think you are, da 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 da. And that was encouraged. That mentality was encouraged in this particular Hebraic community. So I do think that was one thing, one aspect that he wasn't, um, keen on. But as far as doctrinal issues with him, you can see now where those doctrinal issues come from because he's since, done kind of a change in the way that he worships. And I don't want to go too deep or too far into it, but it's clearly one that isn't recommended and is, and he's led his, congregation down that path now. And all of them now are, following him in this error. And so you can see that, okay, well, maybe that would be the case for the written doctrine that they're attempting to, um, put on the people in this particular community. And you have to understand that it may even go community to community. The numbers that they were given for the amount of informants, in the community, we've talked about this before, were one in every six. So that meant from the black community, one out of every six people that you met was an active informant. And, if that's the case, in the Hebrew community, it's probably higher. It's just, it's probably most of the leadership in the Hebrew community because it's the way that you ultimately control an organization is if you put, the person who you want there as the leader of the organization to keep the people, you know, from getting to where that you don't want them to be, or to be distractions or be agitators or whatever, however you want to steer this group. Um, that's the way that you can do that with your person at the head. And we see that all the time. We see that there was a movie, The Departed, with Jack Nicholson. And Jack Nicholson in this movie, the whole time he's this big gangster and he's trying to sniff out the rat the whole time. He's this big gangster and he's got this organization. It's based on a true story too. He's got this organization. Let's see. It says, I often question the imagery presented. I wonder why so many Hebrew camps heavily use the star. Exactly. Heavily use the Star of David. I only see the key of David on scripture, but not the star. Because that's the Star of Remphan. That's the six-pointed star that's associated with the deity, the false deity, I think of the Amorites or one of those different groups. And, it's a sigil. That's what it is. And it's literally, if you go by we talked about this last time, if you go by the angles of the pyramid, we know that the degree compass was, made on 360 degrees so that they could have these particular shapes that represented a number, right? And so the imagery that you're saying, the 6-point star, we know to be an ancient evil symbol too, an ancient signal started called the Star of Remphan. And that's in Amos 5, I believe it's verse 26. And then it's also, I can't remember, don't quote me on that verse, but I know it's Amos 5. And it's also in Acts chapter 7, when Stephen recounts the history of Israel. He uses that same, he quotes Amos 5. and says the same thing. It says, "The star of your God, Remphan, and I will carry you across to Babylon," right? And so that particular star is associated with the 6 point star, which is also associated with the Ashkenazi people, which is also associated with the GDs in Chicago, which is also associated with the Crips, and then also associated with these particular Hebrew camps. And you spot on, you right on with that, because their imagery does give them away. So we know that. We know that they are a controlled group, and we can tell they're a controlled group because of their doctrine, right? They have this wild doctrine, and I don't know. I could name names of groups. I would run out of well, I'd run out of names because I only know a couple of them. Um, but lots of them use the star. And every time I see the star, I know to go the opposite direction. So hallelujah for that, being able to see the symbols and knowing from the symbols, where their doctrines lie or where they're going to be and who they represent, right? Do you guys have any questions on here? I wanted to really go into this probably a little bit deeper. I'm watching also the guy, his name is Dothard Perry. It was the guy I was talking about who kind of looks like O.J. Simpson to me. But I think it's just his head. He's got a big head. But he goes into how he was a spy, basically, for the U.S. government, for the FBI, and they would pay him, and all he would do is go around and commit crimes, commit arson, help people sell drugs, give names and numbers, and convince people to do this, convince people against doing that. That's all he did, and he said that he even said that he volunteered to go to New York and to infiltrate the Black Panther Party in New York. But they said, we have so many assets in that organization already that we don't need your help. And this is in the 60s and 70s. Crazy, you guys, crazy. And this is the reason why um, you really have to keep your eyes open. I was going to say that you should leave America, but they've got them out here too. I mean, if you know, you know. They've got them out here too. And I don't want to get too deep into it, but you can tell that something's not right. So they've got their eyes and ears out here too. And Malcolm X was spotting it too. He said, "Oh, I know, I've seen the agents. I've seen some of the guys that aren't of us, even the guys that don't come up and introduce themselves as agents. I see them out there. I see the enemy out there." And we want to distinguish between the American government and the people. Do you see what I'm saying? Even though the people are influenced by all of these operations, and they are a lot of times going to do the same thing, be helpers of the operation, either wittingly or unwittingly. Um, but really, most of the people, or a great deal of the people, would be sympathetic, would be adherents if they just had the information. Do you see what I'm saying? That's why they have to do their work on them too. It's not just us that don't know who we are. It's also Magog, the community of Magog, not the government of Magog, the community of Magog, that also don't know who they are either. And that's a scary thing too, to be a part of you know, the plan against righteousness and not know it, or even be from the fam. This is to tell you how late it is, or early. It's the Muslims. Um, but um, but that's the thing. Oh man, and I don't know where I was going with that. I forgot my train of thought now. But we just got to be careful out here, because they're out here, and who knows how they're trying to sway you one way or the other. So you just got to be vigilant, literally vigilant, and make sure that you have the spirit of discernment, because you want to test all things. You want to test all things, you guys. Okay, I guess that's all I got. If nobody has any questions, I really appreciate you guys for coming on here my brother. I'm learning how to trade, and then of course, Aki, we gonna get to that album. We're actually producing the album together, so we gonna get to it. But I appreciate everybody coming out. Shalom, shalom.